Hey everyone, and welcome to DnD Horror Stories with DnD Doge. In today's video, we have a story about a player that gets so angry at a Lord of the Rings themed Dungeons & Dragons game that he assaults the DM. A story about a player that gets refused after flirting in-game, so he F's around and finds out. And much more. So without further ado, let's get right into the DnD Horror Story cringe. Dungeons & Dragons player attacks the Dungeon Master after dying in-game. By Reddit user OKCuckoo27. This happened a few years ago at our DM's house. He was hosting an apocalyptic campaign set in Middle-earth, but with a very loose connection to actual Tolkien lore. I remember I was playing a Drow barbarian from the ruins of Mordor, for example. The a-hole in question was playing as a human wizard. He was actually the DM's sister's boyfriend at the time, as she was playing with us. I never was crazy about him, but he seemed somewhat normal, until we started playing, at which point he got super competitive and self-important. His character had to be more important than everyone else's, especially DM's sister's. She was an orc cleric. I remember, for example, the party being sent to an eastern city-state called Eisenor to investigate the rise of a new Dark Lord, and he monopolized 80% of the dialogue with the NPCs, and would, quote, remind the party that he was the, quote, leader of this investigation, because the wizard always leads the party in Middle-earth. And any NPC, of course, who reminded him that he is not a Mire like Gandalf, basically the DM's way of keeping his ego in check, would either get harassed, murdered, or even in one case, he attempted to commit SA on an NPC who told him to F off, and that he was not a true wizard. The DM stopped him and warned him that there would be none of that in this campaign. He didn't argue, but did crap talk the DM, and claimed that he was, quote, busting my balls, and not letting his character be authentic, and, quote, denying my player agency. The final session with him, and of this campaign, unfortunately, was when we did find the Dark Lord and confronted him. We, as a party, way overestimated our strength, which was our fault. This led to everyone but the DM's sister and another player, a Hobbit barbarian, dying. This includes DM's sister's boyfriend, who raged at the DM for allowing us to even fight such a high-level enemy just to get killed. He said, "You knew what we were up against, and killed off most of the party. Piece of crap, DM." And then accused the DM of doing all this just to kill him off because you couldn't handle my character. And then, bizarrely claiming, you can't handle the fact that I'm balls deep inside your sister every effing day, you jealous ass bitch. DM was obviously also getting angry at this point, and telling him what a baby he was being, and he kept yelling at the DM as me and DM's sister tried to calm him down. He then tells DM's sister, "Shut the F up," and then DM got in his face and said, "Don't you ever talk to her like that." And then he punched the DM in the face, knocked him to the ground, and started to strangle him. His sister was freaking the heck out, and Hobbit Barbarian was trying to pry him off. But then I threatened to call the police on him, and that's what got him to stop. He got up in my face for a second, and then just stormed out. We all checked on the DM, and he was okay. His sister insisted he get checked out by a doctor, so he did, and was fine medically. Then, the crapstain called DM's sister to try and apologize, but kept making excuses about how DM was apparently trying to provoke a fight. But she was done with him, and told him that she never wants to see him again. So then, he started raging at her, and said that she never stood by him, and then started making disgusting suggestions about her having sex with the DM. She then blocked him, and I have no idea what they did in terms of legal action, or if that psycho ever got called again, but that game kind of got soured, and we never finished it. We ended up playing D&D again about a year later, with a new setting and characters, and we are still friends. Well, that dude was totally a stable and well-adjusted adult. But in all seriousness, the spotlight hogging and stating that he was the party's leader is a minor thing compared to what happened later. I can understand the DM trying to keep him in check with the NPCs so that the other players didn't feel like they were playing second fiddle to the wizard. But of course, Wizard acted the way he did. And then, when the players, admittedly, took on an adversary that was way too hard for them, resulting in a near TPK, of course this player would throw a fit. But to take it to physical assault shows that the wizard just didn't have a hold of his own emotions. And thankfully for DM, Wizard fled when the threat of police being called by OP was said. Some people just take D&D way too seriously, and this is an extreme example of that. Thankfully though, it sounds like OP and the rest of the group still play together, and DM's sister got far away from that dude, as I could see that relationship becoming abusive. Let's move on to the next post. Fellow player tries to romance my character, and after getting refused, attempts to SA them during a long rest. By Reddit user Kind Recording 3081. I'm usually a DM. I've run plenty of campaigns and have ended up as sort of the forever DM amongst my friend group. So when a friend of mine invited me to join a campaign that was coming up, I leapt at the chance. I joined the Discord server and got acquainted with the DM and other players before getting the rundown of the setting, rules, and other important details. The quote problem player here, let's call him Frollo. Fitting, I'd say. Frollo was pretty normal when we met, had a short chat when I joined, and seemed chill with the rest of the party. Come game day, I arrive with my fresh character called Allison, a half-elf, draconic bloodline sorceress who's heir to a kingdom ruled by a red great worm. And so, she managed to flee in hopes of starting a new life away from her royal responsibilities. Other party members include a half-orc fighter, a tabaxi rogue, a water genasi cleric, and finally, Frollo, an elven ranger. I'm not going to bore you with the first few sessions, as nothing really happened. A good chunk of the way through, and after some talk with the DM and player in question, I have Allison slowly start to fall in love with the party's cleric, and vice versa. It starts with short moments of flirting, until after a few sessions, the two properly get together. Cue the bells of Notre Dame. Frollo's character began flirting with mine, making comments about her body, voice, and how wonderful of a personality she had. I politely turned down each advance, while being befuddled, wondering why he was doing this. I had a talk with the DM about it, expressing how it was making me feel uncomfortable, and asking the DM to do something about it. The DM assured me that everything would be handled, and the next session, Frollo stops his behavior. 4 sessions pass, and Frollo starts up his flirtatious advances again. I continue politely turning him down, which is when he, out of character, comments on how his name sounds so good with my voice. I'm a straight guy, so this was extremely out of pocket and uncomfortable. The DM decided to call the session off early, and expressed to me that he would have a serious talk with Frollo. Unfortunately, he was yet to light the fire. 2 more sessions go by, and we decide to go for a long rest. We have some nice roleplay moments, and after a short cuddle session with the party's cleric, I decide to go to sleep. Frollo then asks the DM if he can sneak into my tent. Both the DM and I are immediately taken aback, and absolutely dumbfounded by what we're hearing from this guy. Before the DM even has time to respond, Frollo rolls a dice and gets a natural 19. The DM briefly describes how Frollo manages to slip into the tent, but wakes Allison up before he can do anything. Allison promptly screams at Frollo to get the F out of her tent, which is when Frollo tries to lunge at me in order to rip my shirt off, saying how my relationship with the cleric was heinous. It was a same-sex relationship, and that I should be with a man like him. I've had enough at this point, and ask the DM if I can cast 2 fireballs, once using a sorcery point to use Quickened Spell. Frollo's confident demeanor immediately drops as I see his eyes go wide and his jaw drops, and the DM allows it. Frollo fails his 2 saving throws and is accordingly hit with an atomic bomb as 2 fireballs explode in his face. I survive on 10 HP due to my fire resistance, and Frollo's character is completely charred as he fails his death saves. A long moment of silence follows as everyone is just looking at each other, wondering what the heck just happened, when Frollo erupts into a full tantrum, screaming that he was going to give my character something worthwhile, and that I should have accepted his advances because he knew how a quote, real relationship worked. I, the DM, and the party's cleric all bit back, which is when he actively began to sob before leaving the call and the server entirely. The rest of the session was spent discussing and raving about what just happened. After the session, the DM apologized to me, saying how he should have stopped Frollo from even doing it. I tell him that while that would have been the responsible thing to do, that I had no problem plunging his character into the depths of hell via a fire he created. We had a good laugh, and the campaign went on with Allison and the cleric eventually getting married and settling down in the epilogue. TLDR, player continuously tries to flirt with my character even after she entered a relationship, and flirted with me while knowing I'm a straight guy, and then tried to assault my character during a long rest before getting nuked by 2 fireballs and rage quitting with a toddler-like tantrum. Well, that is one way to get rid of a problem player. In all honesty, the DM was right when he said that he shouldn't have even let Frollo try to sneak into OP's character's tent to begin with. But with the way that Frollo rolled before being asked, I can see a DM just reacting in the moment. At least the DM had the mind to say that this woke up OP's character. That way, OP had a chance to react, which was not a good thing for Frollo. Now, I also think that this story serves as a good lesson of why it's okay to say something as a player if something that someone else is doing is bothering you. You don't have to wait to tell someone to stop something by getting the DM to do it. And in some cases, it coming directly from a player has more of an effect. But none of anyone else's actions, or lack thereof, excuses what Frollo was trying to do, and, in my opinion, deserves an immediate ban. Though, luckily, Frollo left the game of his own accord in shame, which saves the DM the awkwardness of kicking him. Now, before we move on to the next post, if you are enjoying the video, I have to ask that you crit the like button and subscribe, as the algorithm hasn't been so nice to old Doge here. And as a bonus, you know you always get some kitties. Kitties always help, right? Anyway, with that said, let's move on. Player does not engage with the story, but in such a dramatic way that I can't help but be impressed. By Reddit user Slight Delivery 7319. I was running a superhero game a few years ago. It was a break from my usual campaign, and I wanted to involve the DM. They played a duo of a shapeshifter and a strongman, that we will respectively call Bella and Bitey. You'll soon see why. Bella and Bitey start making their name in the city, fighting supervillains, gang members, and foiling bank robberies, the usual fare. After a battle, they find a burner phone ringing in an alley. Bitey picks it up and answers it. On the other end, there's a clearly modified voice that congratulates them on the job and wants to meet them, offering them some leads for their investigation. Bitey breaks the phone and throws it away. Bella is kinda flabbergasted by this, as it was clearly a quest hook. Bella was a DM after all. But Bitey tells them that it's what his character would do since he doesn't trust people, especially mysterious voices on the phone. Which is fair. But if people in the superhero genre did reasonable things, we wouldn't have comic books. After a while, our team fights a new superpowered gang, save a hospital from a villain with time-stopping powers, meet a Commissioner Gordon analog to help them, figuring that it would be a better appreciated quest hook. It was, but I had to find a way to at least wrap up that previous plotline, since Bitey wanted to know, at least, what the deal was. It was supposed to be a rogue superhero, working against the government, and making some kind of authority, like Super Team, by the way. Bitey finds another phone, and this time, Bella wants to answer, but he insists upon it. Before the voice can even say anything, Bitey goes into a tirade about how he doesn't like being followed, and he would crush him the next time he called. He then proceeded to eat the phone, describing very loudly how he was chewing on it and making dull crunching noises. Bella is, again, surprised at this, since even the player said that he wanted to know who he was. Bitey says that this is all a ploy to draw him out in the open if he really wants to talk. After yet another mission in which they infiltrate a nightclub ran by a clairvoyant, this time our mysterious wannabe backer calls Bitey on his own phone from a private number. The moment he recognizes who it is, Bitey actually breaks his own phone, tears off the SIM, and then eats it. And that was the end of that plotline, and the campaign shortly after, due to scheduling issues. I have never seen a plot hook refused so thoroughly. I could have used another way for contacting them, true. But on the other hand, I don't know if Bitey would have tried to eat a messenger or a carrier pigeon, and I do not want to know. Well, sometimes you will get the players that just won't follow the stick. And in this case, after trying 2 times to get Bitey to actually take the call and get the plotline moving, perhaps OP should have had the mysterious person call Bella's phone instead, as that player actually seemed to want to follow said plot hook. But alas, this game fell prey to the BBEG of all tabletop RPGs: scheduling issues. But here's hoping that OP can run this game again sometime, and with people that will actually follow a trail of breadcrumbs. And before we get to today's final story, if you would like to support the channel directly, you can always do so by subscribing to the Patreon or becoming a YouTube member. I still need to make custom emojis of all the kitties though. Or you can always toss some cat food money at me via Buy Me a Coffee or Ko-Fi. But with the shameless shilling out of the way, let's get to today's final DnD horror story. Player keeps asking for exceptions, but doesn't want to deal with the consequences. By Reddit user Random Joseph. I was DMing a 5th edition game for my friends, and we were planning to go through Tales from the Yawning Portal. Most of my players came up with quirky yet fun designs for characters, and I did my best to accommodate their ideas. One of my players, the problem player, wanted to play an artificer with a mechanical pet. That's fine, I thought. However, it was difficult to incorporate this into the rules. He wanted to use the spell, Tiny Servant, but that was a 3rd level spell, which he would not get until he hit level 5. and everyone in the party was starting at level 1. It took a bit of negotiating and talking with the other players on what they were okay with, but we decided to allow him to have the Tiny Servant spell for the cost of one of his spell slots, which would be refunded should he ever reach level 5. Hint, he did not. The game went on fairly well. Artificer was less a spellcaster and more of a support, but the other players were fine with that, except Artificer, of course. He complained a lot about how he had only one spell slot. He believed it was unfair since it nerfed him as a magic user, never mind that he was casting a 3rd level spell at level 1. I told him that I didn't mind reverting the ruling we made on Tiny Servant, but he did not want to lose his combat pet. Eventually, the party got enough experience to level up, and I told everyone to just take the average roll for their health bonuses. Artificer, though, had another idea. He wanted to roll for his health. I rolled my eyes and thought, give them a foot and they'll take a mile. I told him that I was ruling that we take the average and didn't want to bend the rules a second time, just for him. He said that it wasn't against the rules as written, that players could roll for their health or take the average, and that since he was an artificer with an 11 in con, he really needed the extra health. I calmly, and probably a little condescendingly, explained to him that allowing him to roll would make things unfair, both for him and the other players. Besides, he wasn't likely to get more health by rolling. In fact, he only had a 3 in 8 chance to get a higher score, yet he had a 1 in 2 chance to get a lower score. We went back and forth for a bit until I relented. Fine, I said, roll for your health increase, but whatever comes up on the dice is what you have to take. Got it? He responded, Yeah, I know it's a gamble, but I really need the health. He then rolled a 2. I think I'll just take the 5. No, you rolled a 2, plus 0 from Constitution, so that's all you're getting. But you let everyone else take the average. As you can imagine, he was not happy with my ruling. We got into another argument over this before he threw his hands up and stormed out. The next session, I welcomed everyone back and went over their character sheets to make sure everyone had leveled up correctly and hadn't forgotten anything. Nothing seemed to be amiss until I got to Artificer's sheet. I said, you should have 10 HP, not 13. What do you mean? You rolled a 2 last session. Add that to the 8 from level 1, and with nothing added from Constitution, you should have 10 HP. I didn't roll. You made everyone take the average, remember? I distinctly remember getting into an argument with you about your right to roll. It was at this point that the other players chimed in and told him to stop trying to game the system. He shot back that it was unfair, that he needed the health. He said that we had already taken a spell slot from him and now wanted to make things more unfair for him. I said to him, I told you the price for getting the Tiny Servant spell was one of your spell slots. I told you the price for rolling for your health would be taking whatever comes up on the die. I don't feel that these are unfair things to ask, and you agreed to both. You gave me an ultimatum. What else was I supposed to do? Play the game like everyone else? Again, more arguing, until eventually I just asked him to leave. That if this was his attitude, then I did not want him at my table. The group fell apart shortly after. It sucks because I had a really good time with the other players, but after that whole debacle, everything else just felt awkward. Perhaps I should have just let him have those exceptions, but I've done that stuff before, and it just led to one player being way too overpowered compared to the others, which can ruin the fun. Should I have allowed the, quote, rule of cool? Should I have stuck to the rules and not made exceptions in the first place? Or was this guy just a dickhead? Either way, it's in the past, and I hope you guys had fun reading this through. Well, personally, I feel like that player was just a dickhead. OP practically bent over backwards to allow this player a level 3 spell at level 1, and I think the compromise they made was fair. Then, when it came to Artificer wanting to roll for health instead of taking the average, but not liking the result, he literally tried to gaslight OP into thinking that he never rolled in the first place. So I don't blame OP at all for kicking this player after all of this. It does suck that the game fell apart afterwards, but if OP kept the game going with this player, there would have been a lot more headaches down the road. I can guarantee you that. Hopefully though, OP has since found a decent group to play with. But that is all I have for you today. As always, I appreciate all of you, and hope that your games remain horror story free. Until next time.